The venue of the annual top-tier charity gala blazed with opulent grandeur. Crystal chandeliers stretched across vaulted ceilings, casting shimmering golden light over polished marble floors, while custom luxury cars lined the entire private block, stretching as far as the eye could see. Layered security teams patrolled every entrance and corridor, their rigid postures and vigilant gazes creating an impenetrable defensive perimeter worthy of a high-stakes political or corporate summit. Every prominent figure across the city's business, political, and underground elite had gathered here tonight. Each guest in attendance wielded staggering wealth, far-reaching social connections, and the authority to shape local industries and public opinion. This was an exclusive realm of power and privilege where ordinary people could never hope to step foot, until an aging janitor quietly turned this prestigious gala upside down with nothing but a mop and a weathered bucket. Chen Fan hunched slightly as he worked silently in the shadowed back corner of the banquet hall. His faded blue janitor's uniform was worn thin at the cuffs and collar, marked by years of repetitive labor. Streaks of gray threaded through his dark hair, and deep, weathered wrinkles lined his face, carving out a lifetime of toil and quiet endurance. To every eye in the room, he was nothing more than a feeble, invisible elderly laborer, a man so unremarkable that the wealthy guests subconsciously avoided his presence, treating him as little more than a part of the venue's background furnishings. No one in this entire room knew the truth hidden beneath his ordinary exterior. 20 years ago, Chen Fan had been the legendary hidden dragon, the untouchable overlord who controlled half the global underground economy across Europe, America, and Asia. A single word from him could trigger drastic fluctuations in Wall Street stock market. A single order could force all transnational underworld forces across the Western Hemisphere to cease fire instantly. The world's wealthiest tycoons and most ruthless kingpins had begged endlessly for a mere 5 minutes of his audience, only to be repeatedly denied. Tired of endless power struggles, brutal vendettas, and the suffocating weight of absolute authority, Chen Fan had voluntarily disbanded his sprawling global empire, dispersed the vast majority of his accumulated wealth, and vanished from the international stage. He chose to settle in this quiet American city, embracing a life of utter obscurity as a humble janitor, seeking nothing more than peace and ordinary days. The gala was hosted by the powerful Wilson family, a dominant local dynasty that controlled lucrative real estate, high-end hospitality, and private security industries. Jack Wilson, the family's current patriarch, was a well-known local tycoon with deep-rooted connections in both civilian business circles and municipal governance. For decades, he had reigned over the region with unbridled arrogance, growing accustomed to deference from every corner of local society. At that moment, Jack stood at the center of the banquet hall, surrounded by a dense crowd of fawning billionaires and celebrity socialites. He held a crystal glass of vintage red wine in one hand, his posture tall and domineering, his smile brimming with supreme confidence and superiority. "Thank you all for gracing tonight's event," Jack proclaimed, his voice booming across the silent hall with practiced charisma. "Moving forward, any colleague in this room who encounters trouble within our city's borders has the full backing of the Wilson family. We handle all problems, big and small." Applause erupted instantly, warm and fervent. Every guest present understood this was no empty courtesy. The Wilson family's influence was deeply entrenched in the city's infrastructure, economy, and governance. Within this district, Jack Wilson's words were virtually unchallengeable law. A sudden, dull clatter shattered the room's refined atmosphere. While mopping the floor near the rear exit, Chen Fan had accidentally bumped his water bucket against a metal guardrail. The sharp, abrupt sound cut through the soft music and low murmurs of the elite crowd like a blade. In an instant, every head in the hall swiveled toward the humble janitor in the corner. The previous warmth and sophistication vanished entirely, replaced by uniform disdain, irritation, and condescension. To these privileged men and women, the clumsy mistake of a blue-collar worker was nothing short of vulgar contamination, tarnishing the elegance of their exclusive gathering. A towering white security captain stormed toward Chen Fan, his face contorted with rage. A former Special Forces veteran, he headed the Wilson family's private security team, renowned for his ruthless efficiency and zero-tolerance attitude toward anyone who disrupted his employer's events. He closed the distance in 3 long strides and shoved Chun Fan's shoulder hard enough to send the elderly man stumbling backward, his balance fraying dangerously. "You old fool!" the security captain snarled, his tone sharp and cruel, laced with unbridled contempt. "Do you have any idea where you are? This is a private elite gala, not some back alley dump. You dare cause trouble here? You're asking for disaster." Chun Fan steadied his swaying frame slowly, his aged, weary eyes lifting to meet the guard's furious gaze. He said nothing, his expression calm and unruffled. He simply bent down, intending to right the tipped bucket and clean up the minor mess, unwilling to escalate a trivial accident into a confrontation. For 20 years, Chun Fan had lived by a simple principle: endure silently, avoid conflict, and cherish the quiet, ordinary life he had fought so hard to attain. He had grown accustomed to the cold stares, casual disrespect, and unfair treatment that came with his lowly social status. To him, trivial humiliation was a small price for peace. Yet his quiet forbearance was misinterpreted by the crowd as cowardice and inferiority. Snickers and mocking whispers rippled through the banquet hall, each word sharp and demeaning. Where did this old beggar come from? How did he even get past security? Typical lower-class ignorance. No sense of etiquette, no class at all. The man reeks of poverty. Get him out of here immediately. He's ruining the entire mood of the gala. Jack Wilson's brows knotted tightly with fury. This was his night, his moment to shine as the city's most respected industrialist. A trivial mishap from a nameless janitor had embarrassed him in front of every key figure in the region, and his pride burned with indignation. He strode forward, stopping directly in front of Chun Fan, his tall frame casting a domineering shadow over the hunched elderly man. His eyes blazed with icy arrogance, the look of a king staring down at a worthless insect. "Old man," Jack said coldly, his voice dripping with disdain, "do you understand what you've done? Your clumsy mistake has insulted every distinguished guest in this room." Chun Fan lifted his gaze again, his tone steady and unemotional, devoid of any fear or flattery. "It was merely a spilled bucket of water. I will clean it up immediately. There is no need to exaggerate the matter." "No need to exaggerate?" Jack let out a low, cruel laugh, as if he had heard the most ridiculous joke imaginable. "This is my venue. On my property, every rule is my rule. I decide what is trivial and what is unforgivable." He lifted his polished leather shoe and pressed it firmly against the spotless floor Chun Fan had just mopped, grinding his heel back and forth deliberately to leave a dirty, obvious scuff mark. He stared down at the ruined clean surface with a malicious smirk, enjoying the power imbalance entirely. "You love mopping floors so much," Jack sneered, his voice sharp and threatening. "Then get on your knees and lick the spot clean right now. Do that, and I'll let you walk out of here unharmed. Refuse, and I'll cripple your old legs and dump your body in the ocean for the fish." A dead silence fell over the entire banquet hall. Every guest froze, their eyes fixed intently on Chun Fan, waiting eagerly for the humiliating scene to unfold. No one believed the frail, penniless elderly janitor had any choice but to submit to the billionaire's cruel demand. In their eyes, a poor laborer had no dignity worth protecting. The security captain stepped forward, raising his hand to clamp down on Chun Fan's head and force him to his knees, ready to execute his employer's cruel order without hesitation. 2 decades of peaceful seclusion had softened his edges, but they had never erased his bottom line. He could tolerate casual disrespect, unfair treatment, and the hardships of a humble life, but he would never endure deliberate, public humiliation designed to crush his dignity entirely. Chun Fan slowly straightened his hunchback. In that instant, the frail, elderly, worn-out aura that had clung to him for 20 years melted away completely. A terrifying, overwhelming pressure erupted from his thin frame, the same domineering aura that had suppressed countless international tycoons, ruthless underworld kings, and powerful politicians across the globe. No dramatic movement, no threatening words, no display of anger. Merely a shift in his posture was enough to drop the temperature of the entire banquet hall sharply. A suffocating, soul-chilling oppression settled over every person in the room, pinning them in place. The security captain's hand froze midair, his entire body locking up. Every hair on his body stood on end, and an irrational, primal terror surged from the depths of his soul. He could not move an inch, his muscles rigid with fear he could not explain. Jack Wilson's arrogant smile solidified on his face, then faded completely. A cold sweat broke out across his back instantly, his heart pounding violently in his chest. He had confronted vicious gang leaders, cold-blooded businessmen, and high-ranking officials throughout his career, yet he had never felt such bone-deep, overwhelming dread. This was not the fear of a physical threat. It was the instinctive terror of a mortal facing an unstoppable god. Before anyone in the stunned crowd could process what was happening, a flurry of rapid footsteps exploded from the banquet hall's main entrance. A fleet of top-of-the-line black luxury sports cars roared to a precise stop along the curb outside the villa. Hundreds of formally dressed elite bodyguards poured out of the vehicles in perfect formation, swiftly sealing off every road, entrance, and exit of the entire mansion compound, establishing a level of security reserved only for heads of state and global billionaires. 3 figures then rushed into the banquet hall with urgent, uncharacteristic haste. 3 men who stood at the absolute pinnacle of American business, underworld power, and politics. Their simultaneous appearance at this local gala was unprecedented, a spectacle that defied all common sense. Leading the group was Sam Black, the undisputed king of the city's underground world. He controlled every gray industry in the region, from private high-end clubs to underground trading networks. Even municipal government officials and police chiefs gave him unreserved deference. He was the invisible ruler of the city's shadow economy, with enough power to destroy any local enterprise overnight. Right behind him stood Lawrence Rockefeller, the current heir and chief controller of the Rockefeller financial conglomerate. Trillions of dollars in global assets moved at his command, and a single statement from him could shift Wall Street's entire market trend, shaking the American financial system. The final man was Senator Horton, a rising star in state politics with substantial real governing power and a promising future in federal office. His influence extended across policy formulation, industry supervision, and municipal resource allocation. Any one of these 3 men could overwhelm Jack Wilson's family power with a single word. Yet today, these 3 titans, who rarely appeared in public together, let alone lower themselves to attend a local charity event, had arrived in person, their faces etched with obvious urgency and anxiety. Every guest in the hall was utterly dumbfounded, their minds struggling to comprehend the unprecedented scene unfolding before them. Jack Wilson himself was stunned beyond belief, his earlier arrogance completely shattered by shock. Hurriedly straightening his custom suit, Jack rushed forward, his tone filled with the utmost reverence and deference reserved only for untouchable superiors. "Mr. Black, Mr. Rockefeller, Senator Horton, it is my greatest honor to welcome you all tonight. I had no idea you would grace my event. Please accept my sincerest apologies for any shortcomings in our reception." He had prepared himself to be ignored entirely. To stand in the presence of these 3 legends was already a once-in-a-lifetime privilege for a local tycoon like himself. But the unimaginable happened next. Sam, Lawrence, and Horton did not spare a single glance at the fawning Jack. They walked straight past him, past every wealthy elite in the room, their steps unhesitating as they headed directly for the hunched janitor standing quietly in the corner. Beneath the collective, horrified gaze of the entire banquet hall, the 3 untouchable top-tier powerhouses bowed their heads simultaneously, their postures perfectly respectful and utterly humble. Their voices echoed clearly through the deathly silent hall, carrying a deep, unfeigned awe and remorse. "Sir, we are sorry for being late." Time seemed to freeze entirely. Every billionaire, socialite, and elite guest sat frozen in their seats, their pupils dilated in extreme shock, their breath caught in their throats. The 3 most powerful men in the entire region were bowing respectfully to an aging, ragged janitor. Jack Wilson's face drained of every drop of color in an instant. His legs buckled beneath him, and he crashed heavily to the marble floor, overwhelmed by crushing despair and terror. In that moment, he finally understood the monstrous, unfathomable existence he had arrogantly provoked and humiliated moments before. Several long, trembling seconds passed before the frozen hall filled with the sound of collective gasps. Every pair of eyes in the room remained fixed rigidly on Chin Fan. All the earlier disdain, mockery, and contempt had vanished without a trace, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear that burrowed deep into everyone's bones. Each guest sat rigid, terrified that their earlier judgmental glances and whispered insults would bring ruin upon themselves and their families. Sam straightened from his bow, his usual ruthless, domineering aura as an underworld king replaced by solemn gravity. He turned his cold, sharp gaze toward Jack Wilson, who lay crumpled on the floor, trembling uncontrollably. "Jack," Sam said, his voice low and icy, carrying the weight of absolute authority, "your arrogance has grown far beyond your station." That single sentence sent violent shivers through Jack's entire body. In this city, Sam Black was a shadow law. A single unfavorable word from him could bankrupt a century-old enterprise, erase a family's social status, or make a person disappear permanently with no questions asked. Jack had spent his entire career currying favor with men like Sam, never daring to meet his eyes directly, let alone incur his wrath. Scrambling desperately to his knees, Jack's lips trembled uncontrollably, his face ashen and soaked with cold sweat. "Mr. Black, I beg your forgiveness. I had absolutely no idea of this gentleman's identity. I was ignorant and reckless. I spoke out of turn. I committed an unforgivable mistake. Please spare me." Panic completely unraveled his composure. After decades navigating high-stakes business and elite social circles, he knew better than anyone what it meant for three top-tier powerhouses to bow to an ordinary-looking man. This elderly janitor was not just influential. He stood leagues above every power structure in the region, an existence beyond mortal comprehension. Lawrence Rockefeller stepped forward next, his usual calm, reserved demeanor replaced by uncharacteristic sternness. The financial tycoon who rarely spoke more than 3 sentences at public events delivered a verdict that shook the entire room. The Wilson family's decades of stable development in the city was never earned by your own ability. It was granted by this sir's tacit approval. 20 years ago, he allowed your family to take root and grow in this territory, gifting you every opportunity you have exploited to build your business empire. The crowd erupted in silent shock as the truth unfolded. The towering Wilson dynasty, which everyone had believed was built by Jack's relentless ambition and business talent, was merely a charity gift bestowed by the humble janitor in the corner. "Yet you have grown greedy and ungrateful," Lawrence continued coldly. "You abuse your borrowed power to bully the weak, monopolize local industries, and flaunt your status. Tonight, you cross the final line by publicly humiliating the man who allowed your family to exist." Senator Horton added his weighty judgment next, his political authority, lending irreversible finality to the situation. "Your family has long engaged in illegal monopolistic practices, tax evasion, and unregulated gray market transactions. We have deliberately overlooked your violations for years, solely to avoid disturbing this sir's peaceful seclusion. But your insolence today has terminated all leniency. You have forfeited every privilege you once held." Jack's mind shattered completely. He had always believed himself untouchable, protected by wealth, status, and intricate social connections. He had never imagined every secret crime, every underhanded deal, every corrupt transaction had been fully known and silently tolerated by the upper echelons of power. They had not feared him, they had merely tolerated him, out of respect for the hidden man he had just insulted. Driven to total desperation, Jack twisted toward Chin Fan, throwing aside all his dignity as a billionaire tycoon. He knelt fully on the hard marble floor, kowtowing repeatedly, his forehead striking the ground hard enough to leave bruising impacts. "Sir, I repent. I am ignorant and vicious. I have eyes but fail to recognize greatness. I beg you to show mercy. I will donate all my family's assets, dissolve all our industries, abandon every title and privilege. I only ask that you spare my life." His voice cracked with hysterical terror. Every trace of his former arrogance evaporated into thin air. The powerful patriarch of the Wilson family was reduced to nothing more than a desperate beggar, pleading for a shred of mercy. Not a single guest in the hall dared to make a sound. Every elite present knew better than to intervene. To speak up for Jack now would be to share his doom, to offend the untouchable figure before them and bring ruin upon their own families and enterprises. Chen Fan stood quietly, his gaze calm and detached as he watched Jack's frantic breakdown. After 20 years observing the elite circles of the city, he was thoroughly familiar with this breed of powerful men, arrogant and domineering when holding power, groveling and pathetic when facing ruin. He spoke slowly, his voice soft yet carrying undeniable weight, echoing clearly across the silent hall. I have lived in seclusion for 2 decades. I seek no fame, no fortune, no power. I avoid conflict and crave only peace and simplicity. I work as a janitor, earning my living honestly with my own hands, no cheating, no exploitation. Yet in your eyes, this honest labor makes me a lowly insect, worthy of public humiliation and arbitrary bullying. My tolerance is not cowardice. I simply choose to ignore trivial trivialities. But I will never allow endless and scrupulous insult. Chen Fan's gaze shifted slightly, landing on the security captain who had shoved him earlier. The veteran guard collapsed to the floor the instant their eyes met, his body shaking violently, his mind blank with overwhelming terror. He understood in that moment that his earlier disrespect had signed his own fate. Chen Fan turned back to Sam, delivering his judgment in 4 simple, unemotional words. "Clean this up." Sam bowed deeply in immediate acknowledgement, his tone reverent. "As you command, sir." To ordinary people, destroying a century-old billionaire dynasty was an earth-shattering event that would reshape the entire city's economic landscape. To Sam, it was merely a trivial errand, a simple task to rectify injustice against his revered master. Sam turned sharply toward his bodyguard captain, his voice cold and decisive. "Freeze all Wilson family assets, seal every industrial property, and launch a full investigation into all gray transactions and illegal operations. Detain all affiliated personnel for thorough questioning. No exceptions." He gestured toward the trembling security captain. "This man assaulted an innocent civilian and abused his authority. Deal with him per the strictest rules." 2 bodyguards stepped forward instantly, seizing the paralyzed security captain and dragging him away without a sound. The entire process was ruthless, efficient, and utterly final. Jack's body convulsed violently as despair washed over him in crushing waves. He knew, with absolute certainty, that the Wilson family was finished. Decades of blood, sweat, and wealth accumulation, a business empire built over 3 generations, countless connections and accumulated status, all of it had vanished in an instant, destroyed by 4 quiet words from an aging janitor. Lawrence delivered the final, fatal blow to the fallen dynasty. Effective immediately, all Wall Street capital permanently cuts ties with the Wilson family. No financial institution under my control will ever cooperate with any of their subsidiaries or affiliates, now or in the future. Senator Horton finalized the political eradication. All government-level qualifications and industry licenses held by the Wilson family are revoked. All illegal conduct will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Their social influence and political connections are completely erased. Cornered and utterly defeated, Jack's consciousness finally gave out. His eyes rolled back, and he fainted dead away on the spot. Bodyguards dragged his unconscious body out of the hall like discarded trash, removing the last trace of the once mighty Wilson family from the gala venue. In mere minutes, one of the city's most powerful and influential wealthy dynasties had collapsed completely, never to rise again. The guests remained frozen in stunned silence, their hearts pounding with unrelenting fear. All those who had whispered mockeries and cast disdainful glances at Chen Fan earlier were bathed in cold sweat, consumed by crippling regret. They realized how close they had come to triggering their own destruction with their casual arrogance. Sam turned back to Chen Fan, his tone cautious and apologetic. "Sir, we failed to protect your peace and allowed you to suffer indignity. This is our dereliction of duty. We will handle all subsequent cleanup thoroughly and ensure no further disturbances trouble your life." Lawrence offered earnest assistance. "If you require any material comforts, housing upgrades, or trivial life conveniences, we are at your full disposal at any time." Senator Horton nodded firmly. "Any trouble, any request, you need only speak one word." Faced with the collective deference and eager loyalty of these 3 industry and political titans, Chen Fan remained completely unmoved, his expression as calm and ordinary as ever. He bent down to retrieve his mop and water bucket, brushing the fine dust off his worn uniform. "I appreciate the gesture, but it is unnecessary. I only wish to work my job peacefully and live a quiet life." With that, he turned slowly, carrying his cleaning tools as he walked steadily toward the rear exit. His figure remained hunched, plain, and unassuming, indistinguishable from any ordinary elderly laborer. Yet every elite in the hall bowed their heads respectfully, holding their breath as they watched him leave. Not a single person dared lift their gaze until his figure completely disappeared around the corridor corner. That night's charity gala would forever be etched into the memory of every attendee as the night they learned the most terrifying truth. The humble, overlooked janitor they had all dismissed as worthless was the untouchable supreme power ruling over their entire world. Night fell over the city, the neon glow of skyscrapers painting the streets in brilliant color. Luxury vehicles departed the Villa District one after another, carrying the stunned elites back to their homes, each person reeling from the night's earth-shattering revelation. Chin Fan walked slowly along the quiet sidewalk, his cleaning tools hanging lightly at his side. The collapse of the Wilson dynasty, the reverent bow of 3 top-tier powerhouses, the entire staggering incident felt like nothing more than a fleeting, irrelevant distraction to his peaceful daily life. 2 decades of seclusion had long weaned him off the thrill of power struggles and grand authority. He no longer craved the excitement of controlling global events. He only cherished the simple, stable tranquility of ordinary days. He resided in an old, low-rise residential community on the city's outskirts, a neighborhood filled with ordinary working-class families. There were no wealthy elites, no power struggles, no hidden schemes here, only quiet, mundane daily life, perfectly aligned with his desire for seclusion. The next morning, Chin Fan rose at dawn as usual. After a simple wash, he donned his clean janitor's uniform and headed to his workplace, a high-end private social club exclusive to the city's wealthy and influential class. The club enforced strict rules and rigid hierarchical management, offering modest pay yet demanding rigorous labor from its grassroots staff. News of the previous night's gala incident had been completely sealed off by Sam, Lawrence, and Horton. A strict gag order was enforced on all attendees, with severe penalties for anyone who dared leak a single detail. As a result, the general public and ordinary service industry staff remained completely unaware of the legendary scene that had unfolded. At the club, all fellow employees knew Chin Fan only as a quiet, diligent, aging janitor who kept to himself, never participated in workplace gossip, and never asked for special treatment. He worked diligently, cleaned thoroughly, and endured every trivial unfairness without complaint. His quiet, docile nature made him a frequent target of petty bullying from younger staff and low-level supervisors. Accustomed to his silence, they often dumped extra work on him, made snide condescending remarks, and deliberately nitpicked his labor, believing him too weak and timid to resist or complain. Chin Fan had always tolerated these small indignities silently, prioritizing his peaceful life over trivial workplace conflicts, until the morning Peter Cross set his sights on bullying him relentlessly. Peter was the club's janitorial department supervisor, a portly, middle-aged man with 5 years of management tenure. Armed with the trivial authority of scheduling shifts and evaluating grassroots staff, he had grown arrogant and tyrannical in his position. He regularly abused his power to bully subordinate employees, deduct wages arbitrarily, and vent his petty frustrations on low-level workers who could not fight back. Patrolling the club's grand lobby at 9 in the morning, Peter's eyes instantly locked onto Chin Fan, who was methodically mopping the marble floor. A surge of petty disdain filled his chest, and he strode over quickly, stopping directly in front of the elderly janitor. "Chin Fan, get over here." Peter's tone was sharp, domineering, and unapologetically condescending, the tone of a petty boss lording his minimal authority over a subordinate. Chin Fan paused his mopping, straightening slightly to meet his gaze, his expression calm and neutral. "Yes, supervisor." Peter pointed aggressively at the spotless floor beneath Chin Fan's feet, his face twisted with deliberate dissatisfaction. "Look at this floor. Streaks everywhere, not polished clean enough. What if a guest slips and falls? Can you afford to take responsibility for that? You're old and slow, just wasting company resources and collecting a paycheck for doing lazy, sloppy work." The floor was in fact immaculate, polished to a flawless reflective shine by Chin Fan's careful work. Peter's criticism was baseless, a deliberate attempt to find trouble and vent his bad temper on the most docile employee on staff. Choosing not to argue over trivial unfairness, Chen Fan replied calmly, "I will remop the area immediately and ensure it meets standard." His humble, unresisting response should have satisfied any reasonable person. Yet Peter grew even more irritated. He was accustomed to subordinates panicking, flattering, and begging for mercy when he reprimanded them. Chen Fan's calm, unflappable neutrality felt like quiet defiance to his petty authority. In a fit of childish arrogance, Peter lifted his leather shoe and stomped heavily on the newly cleaned floor, grinding his heel back and forth to leave obvious, dirty scuff marks across the flawless surface. "Remop it!" Peter sneered loudly, his voice filled with unbridled contempt. "That's not good enough. We have a high-profile business reception today, and this entire lobby needs to be spotless, mirror-perfect. You have 10 minutes to make this floor completely flawless. No streaks, no dust, no imperfections whatsoever. If you fail, I'm docking your full day's pay and suspending you without pay for 3 days." The surrounding part-time cleaners and service staff paused their work, watching the confrontation with quiet sympathy. Everyone knew Peter was deliberately making impossible demands. Achieving mirror-perfect flooring in 10 minutes was an absurd, unreasonable standard designed purely to torment Chen Fan. Several younger employees wanted to speak up for the elderly janitor, but one sharp, intimidating glance from Peter silenced them instantly. No one dared risk losing their stable job to stand up for a coworker. Chen Fan glanced down at the fresh scuff marks on the clean floor, then lifted his eyes to meet Peter's hostile gaze, his tone still steady and unruffled. "I am willing to correct any genuine flaws in my work, but there is no need for deliberate harassment." This mild statement of reason completely enraged Peter. A low-ranking, aging janitor dared to question his authority. In his eyes, every subordinate was obligated to endure his bullying silently. Peter snatched the mop roughly from Chen Fan's hands and slammed it violently onto the floor, the plastic handle cracking against the marble surface. The loud crash echoed through the quiet lobby, drawing every eye in the room. "Harassment! This is discipline!" Peter shouted aggressively, his face red with petty rage. "In this club, my word is the only rule. You get paid by this company, so you obey every single order I give you. You're lucky to have any job at your age. Show some gratitude instead of talking back." He leaned in closer, his voice sharp and threatening, laying down a cruel ultimatum. "You have 2 choices, old man. Kneel down right now and lick these marks clean, and I'll overlook your insolence. Or refuse, and I fire you on the spot, docking every cent of your monthly salary. Your call." The air in the lobby grew tense and silent. All staff froze, watching the forced confrontation with bated breath. No one believed the elderly janitor could resist the supervisor's power. It seemed inevitable that Chen Fan would either suffer public humiliation or lose his only source of income. Peter's arrogance swelled at Chen Fan's silence. He raised his hand, ready to shove the elderly man and force his compliance, eager to crush the last trace of dignity from the quiet old man who had dared to disagree with him. Yet the moment his hand neared Chen Fan's shoulder, a faint, icy chill flashed across Chen Fan's previously calm eyes. No grand aura erupted, no threatening movement followed. It was merely a subtle shift in his gaze, yet it froze Peter mid-motion instantly. A bone-deep, inexplicable terror surged through his veins, a primal instinct warning him that the frail old man before him was far more terrifying than he could possibly imagine. The strange feeling vanished as quickly as it came, and Peter dismissed it as a momentary illusion. Blinded by his petty authority, he refused to believe a powerless janitor could intimidate him. Gritting his teeth, he raised his hand again to strike. "Enough dawdling!" Before he could finish his threat, the roar of high-performance engines erupted from the club's entrance. Several black luxury cars skidded to a precise stop outside the glass doors. Elite bodyguards poured out in formation, instantly securing the entire entrance area. A tall, imposing figure strode rapidly into the lobby, Sam Black himself. The Underground King's usual calm composure was replaced by obvious urgency. His sharp gaze swept across the entire lobby, locking instantly onto Chen Fan, the only person who mattered in the room. Every staff member in the lobby was stunned rigid by the sudden, imposing arrival. Peter, in particular, froze completely, his anger vanishing into pure confusion. He had catered to countless wealthy VIPs at the club, yet he had never seen such a formidable aura or such rigorous security protocol. Sensing an extremely important guest, he instantly abandoned his hostility, plastering a sycophantic smile across his face. Brushing off his previous aggression, Peter hurried forward, bowing repeatedly in exaggerated deference. "Welcome, sir. I'm the on-duty janitorial supervisor. Anything you need during your visit, I will arrange personally to the highest standard." Sam did not spare him a single glance, walking straight past the groveling supervisor without the slightest hesitation. He moved directly toward Chin Fan, stopping before the humble janitor and bowing slightly, his tone filled with obvious remorse and reverence. "Sir, I came to inspect your working environment and discovered someone has dared to disrespect and harass you in your own workplace." The quiet, understated sentence shattered the entire lobby into stunned silence. Peter's fake smile froze rigidly on his face. His brain went completely blank, all blood draining from his face as cold, overwhelming terror crashed over him. He slowly twisted his head to stare at the ordinary, aging janitor he had just threatened, humiliated, and bullied relentlessly. In that horrifying moment, he finally comprehended the terrifying truth of who he had provoked. A suffocating silence blanketed the entire club lobby. Every cleaner, server, and receptionist stood frozen in place, not daring to breathe or move a muscle. All eyes were fixed on Peter, who had transformed from a domineering supervisor into a trembling wreck in the span of a single second. Sam's gaze drifted slowly toward Peter, cold and impassive. There was no overt anger, no threatening tone, yet that quiet, indifferent stare crushed Peter's resolve completely. His legs buckled beneath him, and he crashed heavily to the polished floor, his body shaking like a leaf in a storm. Years of working in service industry management had taught Peter to read status and power better than most ordinary people. He could recognize instantly that the man standing before him was untouchably powerful. For such a legendary figure to personally come to defend this aging janitor meant Chun Fan's status was beyond anything he could fathom. Every insult, every threat, every petty act of bullying he had committed was a death sentence for his career and future. I didn't know. I had no idea who you were." Peter babbled frantically, his teeth chattering uncontrollably, cold sweat soaking through his entire uniform shirt. "I was blind and ignorant. I messed up. I beg you to forgive me. I'll never dare again, I swear it." He slammed his forehead repeatedly against the hard marble floor, kowtowing desperately until his brow reddened and bruised, his dignity completely shattered. The arrogant supervisor who had bullied subordinates relentlessly was now groveling in the most humiliating manner possible. The surrounding staff watched in utter shock, their previous sympathy for Chun Fan replaced by sheer awe. The man they had all watched endure petty bullying in silence was someone so powerful that top-tier kings bowed to defend him. Sam ignored Peter's frantic pleas entirely, turning respectfully to Chin Fan. "Sir, this man has repeatedly harassed and publicly humiliated you. How would you prefer we handle this matter?" Chin Fan stood steadily, his expression calm and unchanging as he looked at the kneeling, terrified man. There was no anger, no resentment in his eyes, only quiet indifference, as if he were observing a trivial, inconsequential farce. "I live simply, seeking no privileges or special treatment," Chin Fan said softly, his voice clear and steady throughout the silent lobby. "My tolerance is not an open invitation for others to abuse and bully. He has long abused his minor authority to oppress grassroots employees, not just myself. Let the matter be handled fairly per official rules." His words were perfectly measured. He sought no cruel revenge, no excessive punishment, yet refused to overlook the supervisor's long history of misconduct. Justice, not vengeance, guided his judgment. Sam understood instantly. He pulled out his phone and dialed the club owner's private number, his tone cold and commanding, leaving no room for argument. "Arrive at the club lobby within 5 minutes. If you are late, all your commercial properties will be sealed and liquidated immediately." The club owner, who was attending an off-site business negotiation, froze in terror the moment he heard Sam's voice. Without a single question or hesitation, he terminated his high-value meeting and raced back to the club at full speed, consumed by panic. 4 minutes later, the flustered club owner burst into the lobby, his expensive suit disheveled, his forehead covered in sweat. He took in the sight of Sam's imposing figure and Peter's crumpled, terrified form, and his heart sank with dread, immediately grasping the severity of the situation. He did not spare a single glance for his kneeling supervisor, rushing directly to Sam and bowing deeply in utmost deference. "Mr. Black, please tell me who has offended you. I will punish them severely at once." Sam gestured coldly toward Peter, his tone sharp and accusatory. "Your supervisor abused his authority to bully grassroots staff, publicly humiliate an innocent person, and attempt to force public degradation. Is this how you manage your employees? Is this the discipline of your high-end club?" The owner's body turned icy with fear. He knew better than anyone how terrifying Sam's power was. Sam could destroy his entire business empire with a single sentence, erasing decades of hard work in an instant. Furious at Peter for bringing such catastrophe upon his business, the owner turned on the kneeling supervisor, his voice sharp and thunderous. "Peter, I entrusted you with management authority to maintain order, not to abuse your power and bully your colleagues. You have brought shame and disaster to this company." Peter trembled violently, attempting to stammer out excuses, yet fear had robbed him of the ability to form coherent words. He could only continue kowtowing and begging for mercy. "I live simply, seeking no privileges or special treatment," Chin Fan said softly, his voice clear and steady throughout the silent lobby. "My tolerance is not an open invitation for others to abuse and bully. He has long abused his minor authority to oppress grassroots employees, not just myself. Let the matter be handled fairly per official rules." His words were perfectly measured. He sought no cruel revenge, no excessive punishment, yet refused to overlook the supervisor's long history of misconduct. Justice, not vengeance, guided his judgment. Sam understood instantly. He pulled out his phone and dialed the club owner's private number, his tone cold and commanding, leaving no room for argument. "Arrive at the club lobby within 5 minutes. If you are late, all your commercial properties will be sealed and liquidated immediately." The club owner, who was attending an off-site business negotiation, froze in terror the moment he heard Sam's voice. Without a single question or hesitation, he terminated his high-value meeting and raced back to the club at full speed, consumed by panic. 4 minutes later, the flustered club owner burst into the lobby, his expensive suit disheveled, his forehead covered in sweat. He took in the sight of Sam's imposing figure and Peter's crumpled, terrified form, and his heart sank with dread, immediately grasping the severity of the situation. He did not spare a single glance for his kneeling supervisor, rushing directly to Sam and bowing deeply in utmost deference. "Mr. Black, please tell me who has offended you. I will punish them severely at once." Sam gestured coldly toward Peter, his tone sharp and accusatory. "Your supervisor abused his authority to bully grassroots staff, publicly humiliate an innocent person, and attempt to force public degradation. Is this how you manage your employees? Is this the discipline of your high-end club?" The owner's body turned icy with fear. He knew better than anyone how terrifying Sam's power was. Sam could destroy his entire business empire with a single sentence, erasing decades of hard work in an instant. Furious at Peter for bringing such catastrophe upon his business, the owner turned on the kneeling supervisor, his voice sharp and thunderous. "Peter, I entrusted you with management authority to maintain order, not to abuse your power and bully your colleagues. You have brought shame and disaster to this company." Peter trembled violently, attempting to stammer out excuses, yet fear had robbed him of the ability to form coherent words. He could only continue kowtowing and begging for mercy. Sam nodded in satisfaction at the proper resolution, turning back to Chin Fan with gentle respect. "Sir, I will arrange ongoing private security oversight of this workplace to ensure no one dares disturb your peace again. Please contact me directly for any trivial trouble or inconvenience." Chin Fan gave a slight nod of acknowledgement, no further words needed. Sam departed with his team of bodyguards, leaving the club lobby to return to its usual quiet. Yet the atmosphere among the staff had transformed completely. All previous disdain, neglect, and condescension toward Chun Fan were gone entirely, replaced by profound, unspoken awe and reverence. No employee dared glance at him casually, let alone gossip about him or slight his work. Everyone treated the humble janitor with cautious, sincere respect. Chen Fan paid no mind to the drastic shift in others' attitudes. He picked up his mop silently and continued cleaning the lobby floor methodically, his movements steady, meticulous, and unchanged. The earth-shattering resolution of his unfair treatment felt like nothing more than a trivial interruption to his ordinary workday. Peter was dragged out of the club by security staff, completely broken and spiritless. The moment he stepped through the doors, he fully understood that his career, reputation, and stable life had been destroyed entirely by his own petty arrogance and pointless bullying. The next 2 days passed in perfect peace. The club's workplace atmosphere improved drastically, with no further instances of workplace bullying or unfair treatment. All staff worked diligently and respectfully, maintaining a harmonious, disciplined environment. Just as everyone believed the conflict had ended completely and life would return to uneventful normalcy, new trouble emerged from the shadows. Troubles brought by Peter's own family, who refused to accept responsibility for their family's ruin. Word of Peter's termination, industry blacklisting, and impending legal investigations spread quickly to his family. His wife and 20-year-old son Ryan refused to acknowledge that Peter's years of workplace tyranny and bullying had led to his own downfall. Blinded by selfish resentment and refusal to accept hardship, they shifted all blame entirely onto Chen Fan. In their distorted view, Chen Fan had been unnecessarily ruthless, using hidden power to destroy Peter's career and plunge their entire family into financial crisis. They ignored Peter's long history of misconduct, his deliberate humiliation of an innocent man, and his abuse of power, choosing instead to paint themselves as innocent victims of a powerful man's petty vengeance. By evening, the sky had dimmed to a soft twilight, the street breeze carrying a cool autumn chill, with only sparse pedestrians remaining on the quiet residential roads. Chen Fan finished his shift on time and walked slowly back to his old community, following his usual peaceful routine. The moment he stepped into the shadow of his apartment building's entrance, 2 figures suddenly emerged from the dark alleyway, blocking his path completely. It was Peter's wife and his young son Ryan. Peter's wife's face was twisted with bitter resentment and rage, her previously gentle domestic demeanor replaced by vicious hostility. She stepped forward abruptly, blocking Chen Fan's way entirely, her voice shrill and piercing in the quiet residential courtyard. "You cruel, heartless old man. My husband merely corrected you a little at work, and you destroyed his entire career. You ruined our whole family's life without a single shred of mercy." Beside her, Ryan's young face contorted with furious anger. Hot-headed, immature, and emboldened by his mother's poisonous resentment, he glared at Chen Fan with unbridled hostility, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. "My dad's 50 years old. He worked his whole life to build a stable career to support our family. You destroyed everything he has in a single day. Now we can't pay our mortgage or car loans. We can barely afford food. Our life is completely ruined because of you." Ryan advanced aggressively, pressing close to Chen Fan with domineering menace. "I don't care what kind of secret connections you have. You're going back to that club tomorrow and getting my dad's job reinstated. You're canceling the blacklist and dropping all legal investigations. You're fixing everything you ruined, or you're not stepping foot in this building tonight." Chen Fan stood calmly in place, his expression unchanging and serene as he observed the mother and son's irrational, blame-shifting fury. After decades of witnessing human greed and stubborn foolishness, he felt no anger, only quiet disappointment at their refusal to acknowledge truth and responsibility. "Your husband abused his professional authority for years, bullying subordinates, deducting wages arbitrarily, and publicly humiliating innocent people," Chen Fan explained steadily, his tone calm and rational. "His downfall is the direct consequence of his own actions. I never initiated conflict with him. His fate belongs solely to himself, not to me." His reasonable clarification only enraged the pair further. Blinded by resentment and self-pity, they were completely incapable of self-reflection, determined to blame their misfortune entirely on an innocent outsider. "Lies!" Ryan roared furiously, his face flushed with rage. "It's all your petty revenge. My dad just disciplined a lowly janitor. You didn't have to destroy our entire family over nothing. You pretended to be weak and helpless just to ambush us with your hidden power. Driven by reckless, youthful anger, Ryan lunged forward, stretching out his hands to grab Chin Fan's shoulders, intending to forcibly drag the elderly man back to the club to reverse his father's punishment. Confident in his youth and physical strength, he believed the frail, aging janitor could never resist his force. Yet the instant his fingers were about to brush Chun Fan's uniform, Chun Fan shifted his body slightly with effortless, precise grace. A simple, casual sidestep perfectly dodged Ryan's aggressive grab. Ryan's momentum carried him forward uncontrollably. He lost his balance completely, stumbling heavily and crashing face first onto the hard concrete pavement. A sharp, painful grunt burst from his lips as his palms and knees scraped raw against the rough surface, stinging abrasions blooming across his skin instantly. The brutal fall doused Ryan's reckless rage for a split second, replaced by burning embarrassment and humiliating frustration. He scrambled back to his feet in a flurry of clumsy movements, his face crimson with shame and fury. All rational thought vanished, swallowed up by childish resentment. Blinded by anger, he refused to acknowledge his own recklessness and instead pinned the blame entirely on Chin Fan. "You did that on purpose," Ryan snarled through gritted teeth, his voice hoarse and unhinged. Filled with reckless arrogance and youthful impetuosity, he completely disregarded the massive gap in status and ability before him. He charged forward once again, fists clenched tightly, intending to throw a wild punch at the elderly janitor. Peter's wife stood frozen to the side, not lifting a single hand to stop her son's reckless violence. Instead, she screamed shrilly in encouragement, her voice sharp and venomous in the quiet courtyard. "Teach this old fraud a lesson. Make him pay for ruining our family. Don't let him get away with it." Her toxic words fueled Ryan's frenzy, pushing him further into irrational aggression. Yet Chin Fan remained rooted in place, calm and unyielding, his eyes quiet and unwavering. He did not strike back, did not retaliate. He merely raised one hand gently, moving with effortless, practiced precision. His palm landed lightly on Ryan's rushing shoulder, a subtle, controlled press of force that held none of brutality, yet carried overwhelming, unshakable power. In an instant, Ryan's forward charge ground to a dead halt. An indescribable, heavy pressure locked his entire body in place, rendering him completely immobile. No matter how he strained his muscles, how he gritted his teeth and struggled to move forward, his body refused to obey. It was as if an invisible mountain weighed down upon his shoulders, pinning him helpless. Panic exploded across Ryan's face, replacing his rage with raw, primal fear. For the first time, he truly sensed the terrifying disparity between himself and this ordinary-looking elderly man. This was no ordinary janitor. This was a figure whose power far exceeded anything he could comprehend. Chin Fan's gaze swept calmly over the terrified mother and son, his tone steady and devoid of any cruelty, only quiet reason. "I have tolerated endless misunderstanding and wrongful blame from strangers. But blind, violent harassment crosses every line. Your husband's ruin stems from his own years of tyranny and abuse of power. Your family's current hardship is the fruit of his own choices, not my vengeance. To cling to resentment, refuse reflection, and resort to violence to vent your frustration is self-destruction, not justice." Peter's wife flinched back, her domineering arrogance crumbling in the face of Chun Fan's calm authority. Yet her hatred and stubborn grievance remained unbroken. She opened her mouth to hurl more vicious accusations, ready to continue her irrational ranting. Before she could utter another word, the distant hum of speeding engines cut through the evening air. Several black luxury vehicles rounded the community corner and skidded to a silent stop outside the residential courtyard. Dozens of elite, well-trained bodyguards exited the cars in perfect formation, their movements swift and disciplined, instantly securing the entire surrounding area. Sam Black stepped out of the leading vehicle, his tall figure cast in the fading twilight. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by icy, unforgiving sternness. He had kept continuous security surveillance on Chun Fan's daily life after the workplace incident, determined to eliminate any possible disturbance to the hidden legend's peaceful seclusion. The moment his men reported the confrontation in the courtyard, he had rushed to the scene without hesitation. Sam strode quickly into the courtyard, his sharp gaze landing on the terrified mother and son, then sweeping over Ryan's scraped skin and their aggressive posturing. Rage simmered beneath his composed exterior. He could tolerate ordinary people's ignorance of Chun Fan's identity, but he would never abide by ordinary civilians daring to use violence and malicious harassment against the man he swore to protect. "Insolent fools," Sam muttered coldly, his voice carrying a bone-chilling chill that made the air turn frosty. The second they laid eyes on Sam's imposing figure and the row of ruthless bodyguards behind him, Peter's wife and Ryan's faces drained of every trace of color. Their earlier ferocity vanished completely, replaced by overwhelming, crippling terror. They had already heard how this powerful man had single-handedly crushed the Wilson family's decades-old dynasty overnight. Faced with such terrifying authority, their petty anger turned to utter despair. Ryan stumbled backward tremblingly, his earlier recklessness completely shattered. Peter's wife's legs buckled beneath her, and she nearly collapsed to the ground, her body shaking uncontrollably. Sir, we didn't know. We were just confused and desperate." Peter's wife stammered frantically, her voice breaking with fear. "We only wanted to seek justice for our family. We never meant to cause trouble or offend anyone. Justice." Sam let out a low, mocking laugh, his eyes cold with disdain. "You call violent harassment and wrongful accusation justice? Your husband abused his authority to bully the weak, humiliate innocent staff, and exploit his subordinates for years. He reaped what he sowed when he lost everything. Instead of reflecting on your family's mistakes, you come here to harass and threaten an innocent man who has harmed no one. You do not deserve one shred of sympathy." Sam waved a hand sharply, his tone decisive and unyielding. "Detain them on the spot. Charge them with aggravated harassment, threat of physical violence, and intentional disturbance of personal safety. Hand them over to the Judicial Department for strict legal prosecution. No leniency, no exceptions." Multiple bodyguards stepped forward instantly, moving with swift, unhesitating efficiency. Before the mother and son could beg for mercy or utter another excuse, they were restrained firmly. Their struggles were feeble and useless against the well-trained elite guards. Tears streamed down Peter's wife's face as she wept and pleaded hysterically. Ryan stood frozen, hollow and numb, finally realizing the irreversible disaster their blind resentment had brought upon their family. Their impulsive retaliation had not saved Peter, it had only dragged the entire family deeper into ruin. Chun Fan watched the scene unfold quietly, no joy, no pity in his eyes. In his decades of walking the world, he had witnessed countless such families, arrogant in power, rampant in dominance, yet utterly unable to accept the consequences of their own wrongdoing, always choosing to shift blame to others. "I do not hunt down the ordinary people who offend me," Chun Fan said softly, his voice clear and final in the quiet courtyard. "But I will never tolerate unprovoked, persistent harm and malice." Sam bowed respectfully beside him, his tone earnest. "I understand your principle, sir. We will handle this matter strictly in accordance with legal procedures, without excessive punishment, and without allowing them to escape their due consequences." Chun Fan nodded slightly, offering no further comment. He turned and walked calmly toward his apartment building, his steps steady and unhurried, as if the entire confrontation and resolution were nothing more than a trivial breeze passing through his ordinary life. That same night, Peter sat alone in his empty family home, drowning in endless despair. He had already received notice of the official labor investigation, and knew his career was permanently destroyed. When he learned that his wife and son had gone to harass Chun Fan and were now facing criminal charges, his spirit completely collapsed. He had once owned a stable job, a complete family, and a decent social status. Yet his endless petty arrogance, abuse of power, and bullying habits had eroded everything he possessed step by step. Every misdeed he had committed finally circled back to destroy his entire family. There was no one to blame but himself. No external force had destroyed his life. He had dug his own grave with his own hands. The next morning, the high-end private club returned to its usual peaceful and orderly atmosphere. The last traces of the previous workplace, bullying, had been completely erased. All management staff strictly abided by the new rules, treating every grassroots employee with fairness and respect. The entire workplace was harmonious and disciplined, free of the petty tyranny that had once plagued it. Chen Fan arrived at work on time at dawn, wearing his clean, simple janitor's uniform. He picked up his mop and bucket, starting his daily cleaning work earnestly and meticulously, just as he had done for years. The entire club staff treated him with silent, sincere reverence. No one dared to underestimate him. No one dared to slight his work. No one dared to speak to him with condescension. Yet Chen Fan paid no mind to the respectful gazes surrounding him. He did not crave admiration, fear, or special treatment. 20 years ago, he had stood at the absolute peak of global power, commanding countless tycoons and kingpins, holding the rise and fall of countless families in his palm. Now, he only wished to sweep the floors quietly, live simply, and guard the ordinary peace he had chosen for himself. The most terrifying hidden overlord in the world chose to hide his unparalleled power beneath the most ordinary civilian identity. He possessed the ability to overturn the city's power structure with a single word, yet he chose to spend his days in trivial, peaceful labor. Fame, wealth, and power were nothing but fleeting clouds to him. True tranquility lay not in dominating the world, but in restraining his own power, enduring trivial mortification, and cherishing a plain and unassuming life. The world feared his hidden power, but only Chen Fan himself understood. The greatest freedom was living as a humble, ordinary mortal.